You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Are you paying too much to trade options? If you're not trading on public.com, the answer is yes. Public is the only platform where you can earn a rebate on every option contract traded, and that's in addition to no commissions or per contract fees. There's no one else out there paying trading rebates, so you won't find a better deal. Bottom line, if you're paying more than $0 to place an options trade, then you're paying too much. Switch to Public and start getting rebates on every single contract traded, only at public.com. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again. It is Friday. It is noon Central. It is 1 p.m. Eastern. Do you know what's going on in the world of vol in this final weekend? Heading into Election Day. Let's find out together, shall we? My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the network. You know the deal. Nearly a dozen shows by now. So wherever you're listening to Vol Views, I'm speaking specifically to the Vol Views audience. I know there's a hardcore Vol Views listenership out there, and we love you all. But if you're not listening to the rest of the network, you're missing out on so much stuff. So wherever you're listening to this, just look for the network. It should be right there in the description of the show. Click on that, then subscribe to that, and bam, you're getting everything. And then, of course, if you want to go above and beyond with an additional podcast feed that gets you 2 bonus shows, Pro Q&A, and oddities coming up after this show there today, then one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. is the place to go to learn more as we learn who's joining us on the old program today. First, let's go out to the hinterlands of Chicago, where I have it on good authority that he is drunk on candy. But he came out of his sugar coma just for us here on the show. He is the once future and present Dr. VSTOXX these days, crunching a lot of VSTOXX data, a.k.a. Mr. Russell Rhoads, holding court down there at the Kelley School of Business when he's not drunk on candy. Mr. Rhoads, welcome back to the show. How goes your sugar high, sir?
This afternoon nap with the dogs as soon as we're done with this.
All right. Well, we'll get you out of here soon so you can go you can go rest, sir. And then also joining us from the Southern Vol Mecca. I'm not sure what they do down there in the land of Texas. I think they all wear bolo ties and then they throw rattlesnakes at each other. He is the greasiest of meatballs. Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Have I correctly surmised the Halloween experience in Austin, sir?
I am currently recovering from multiple rattlesnake whips.
That's the thing. That's the thing. You're the new guy down there, so they all really throw the rattlesnakes at you. You know, that's kind of the thing. So I'm glad to see you survived a Halloween down there in Austin. As we now go out, I'm not sure where he's beaming in from. Is he from Chi-Town? Is he from parts east? I guess let's find out. We are joined once again, appropriately enough, in the Eurex hot seat by Mr. Matt Koren, the equity and index derivatives sale and global VSTOXX lead over there at Eurex, joining us for the first time since back in April. So it's been a while. Matt, welcome back to the program, sir.
Thanks, Mark. I'm dialing in from a very toasty New York City. It's almost 80 degrees here today. So
I hear you guys are getting like a
hopefully
heat
it cools down a bit for the marathon.
The kids in all their heavy costumes probably sweating a bit last night over there on the East Coast. All right, good stuff. With the team assembled, let's dive right on into the volatility review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody. Time to get down to some vol business, of course, a portion of the show where we break down what's lighting up the tape this week and continues to light up our tape today. And like I said, in this final day of the final full trading week before what is potentially a big volatility event. Remember, if you want to stay abreast on all the latest, what's going on election night, listeners, and maybe you don't want all these partisan folks nattering on your TV or in your ears, join us for another election live stream. You folks demanded it, so we're bringing it back. I will be joined by a bevy of special guests throughout election night. One thing's for certain, we may not know the outcome by the end of the night, but I will certainly have no voice, and we will all have a good time at the end of the day. So join us. We'll talk you off the ledge if your candidate of choice is losing. We'll talk you back. We'll give you some fun facts along the way. Should be a good time. All the previous ones have been good. This one should be a fun time as well. Is it a fun time out there in the markets today? Well, I guess it kind of depends what you're looking for. If you're here for a nice kind of aggressive rally to kick off the first trading day of November. By the way, we're in November already. It just sounds, this year is just flying. In some ways, other ways, kind of dragging. So I guess that's appropriate. So kicking off November after yesterday's blood red tide, appropriately enough for Halloween, for the markets to be blood red. NASDAQ was off over 2%, S&P off over 1%. Dow, I think somewhere around 2/3 to 3/4%. Getting a good chunk of that back again today. Dow up about 0.8%, S&P up about 2/3%, NASDAQ up nearly a full percent, about 0.9%. That means all of our vol friends are coming in today, but they are still net up quite a bit since our last show last Friday. In fact, VIX cash, right as we kicked off the show, listeners, was right at about a 21 3/4. That puts it up about exactly 3 points from where it was this time last week. VVIX, the vol of vol itself, up a whopping 9 points from what we saw last week. So a lot to unpack. Let's go around the horn the opposite of the way we started. Let's go out to the Eurex hot seat first, Mr. Matt. We'll get to all the international vol fun in a second. But obviously a lot popping off this week on the domestic vol front as well. What caught your eye, sir?
I think how kind of sleepy it's been, to be honest with you. I think if you look at both, what we're seeing in VSTOXX and look at what you're seeing on SIBO and VIX, it's been relatively quiet. Obviously, it's been a pretty chunky earnings week. But with that being said, vol markets haven't done really anything too exciting. You still have VIX in that 21 range, VSTOXX in that 21 range. Everybody kind of eyes on the prize for next week. So, we haven't seen anything too exciting. I think most people kind of had their positioning on coming into this week and then next week and the next couple weeks. For the most part, what we've seen is pretty much a whole bunch of nothing.
I think I've seen a little bit of volume start trickling in now just as we're talking. So maybe we'll have a little fun to talk about. But, along those lines, Matt, that's something I've been kind of puzzling over for a while now as well. And you're a product guy, so I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this as well. Because you're right, we haven't really seen a banger week, not from an underlying movement perspective on the vol front, but also on the volume side. We haven't really, outside of really one day this week on the VIX front, we haven't really seen a ton of paper in the vol space. And it kind of leads me to wonder if maybe now this is the first election cycle we have with, of course, the binaries that everyone's obsessed with around the election. That's all pretty cool. But also the zero DTE phenomenon that a lot of people have been loving And it kind of makes me wonder if folks who traditionally would have been putting on hedges in whatever the product might be, VSTOXX, VIX, SPX, SPY, whatever the case may be, they might instead be waiting for the day itself, because you can kind of do that now. I'm kind of curious, Matt, from your perspective, do you think these new products are maybe cannibalizing some of the flow we would have normally seen leading into the election, sir?
That's spot on, and that's exactly what we're seeing. And a lot of our market makers have said very similar things. Why trade a 3-month, a 6-month option when you can trade a 2-day option? Obviously, some of the shorter dated activity that you see in S&P, I think the dailies now account for something like 40-45% of volumes. We haven't seen that on Eurex yet and VSTOXX, but you're definitely seeing a trend shorter and shorter. So yeah, I mean, why trade a longer dated option and when you can trade shorter dated?
Yeah, that seems to be the case out there these days. So yeah, very different beast now here in the 2024 cycle, and even than it was just in our last election cycle, listeners. So yeah, interesting stuff afoot out here this cycle as we keep going around the horn. Let's go out to the hinterlands of Chi-Town, where, like I said, I might have to virtually poke him with a stick every now and then because he is nodding off in his sugar coma. Mr. Rhoads, if you are awake, sir, what is catching your eye on the vol front this week?
Since we've been stuck in this wait and see attitude, and I do think a big portion of just the wait and see is you don't have to put your election hedge on until I'm on Chicago time until about 2:59 on election day if you really want to. But I've been paying very close attention to the at the money implied vol for the dailies that expire on election day and the dailies that expire the day after election day. And that number had been about 2.2% different. It was like 14% versus 16%. When we were here this time last week, it's 13% the day before and 22% the day after now. So the Wednesday options for next week, the implied vol is definitely climbing. We'll just, and if anything, the market makers are adjusting. But I'll tell you something, and I know we're supposed to be talking about the vol space. If the options are still cheap going into Tuesday, and we suddenly hear about irregularities during the day, and maybe one of the candidates says this thing's being stolen and all this. Yeah, I think you could see a lot of volatility on Tuesday. Yeah, during the election,
we certainly could.
So I don't think buying I might actually go buy an at the money straddle right now.
Ooh, just swing it.
It just seems to make sense. Of course, anybody that followed me on doubling up on the UVIX last weekend, and we'll get to that, you're not going to follow me at all at this moment after that disaster. Yeah. But that's what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, UVIX took a bit of a whooping.
Yes, it did. So did Dr. VSTOXX, VIX, Dr. Rowe.
I was looking at doing something. You know me, I'm always leery. When it's rallying into the close, that's what I'm kind of like. But I was with you. I was feeling a little bit of that weekend spookage as well. But I did not dive in, thankfully, this week. But yes, I'm sure some of our listeners did, and I'm sure the hate mail and dead animals are coming in the mail for you as we speak, sir. But you mentioned the stuff setting up after the election. I was talking about this on the option block yesterday. We've been talking a lot about these election markets. We had the folks from IB on not too long ago. Petterfee has his new forecast EX. They're trading up a ton of volume around the election as well. I went and noticed, and I pointed this out to Henry on the option block yesterday, who was surprised because he has traded some of these. He didn't even know this. Those binaries, at least on forecast EX, I haven't looked at all the Kalshi and the other ones yet. They settle on January 7th. They don't settle the day after the election or anything like that. So Petterfee hedging his bets. He's not gonna settle any bets out until everything is certified after January 6th. So interesting. A little bit of recent history probably playing into that. Something to be aware of, listeners. If you're slinging some binaries, especially on the forecast EX ones, you're not getting paid on Wednesday morning. You have to wait a little bit. All right, Mr. Meatball, a lot to unpack. A wild week, a crazy end to October, a blood red end, and now looks like a green Santa Claus style kickoff to November. What's catching your eye, sir?
Yeah, yesterday was a bit of a bloodbath. We got some positive news out of Amazon, a little bit of a snapback, but the market has softened as the day has progressed. With, Apple definitely softening up some. Amazon, Amazon has traded and closed at exactly 200 twice. It's never actually closed above 200. And I was interested to see if it could do that. It's not doing it today. So I'm watching what it does on Monday pretty darn closely. After kind of the bloodbath that was Meta and Microsoft on Thursday, nice little rebound. NVIDIA, nice little rebound. But, for how much vol went up, it's not pulling back as much. And you'd expect that. When we get to talking the VIX curve, I put out a picture on Twitter of what the curve looked like 8 years ago, and I kind of want to address that when we get into that. But it's funny how similar this is to past elections. So what we're looking at is really not that unique.
You're always coming out with these little stock nuggets of late. What was the one you had last week that our chat said they were going to go investigate? It was something about, was it NVIDIA? And something along those lines. And now you got the Amazon one. So interesting nugget.
Yeah. It was NVIDIA bigger than Apple.
Yes, that's what it was. Yes,
yes. NVIDIA was bigger than Apple. And I said, that's a short.
Well, there you go.
And NVIDIA has never been that high since.
There
just saying.
You are the kiss of death for upside in NVIDIA. I like it. You killed it single-handedly, sir. So our chat apparently appreciated it. So there you go. Let's see if there's anything to appreciate out there on the vol surface this week. Listeners, let's go out to the land of the VIX futures first. As we're looking at the start of the show here, things are frothy. If you're looking for the magical, mythical 20 handle, of course you can find it in the cash. But if you're going out a little bit into the actual vol surface, looks like right as we were right coming into the start of this segment, we were kissing a 20 almost in July. We're at 1995, and we were at a 20 exactly, 20.00 in the Nove contract. So you can find a couple of 20s, well, one 20 adjacent out there. Everything else is pretty much a 19 handle out there. So intriguing times, even with all this vol lift, you got to really kind of work to get a 20 handle out there, which is kind of interesting, which is also kind of the lament people have had for the better part of the last week and change. If you're looking at some upside in VIX, if you were prepping or speccing on some upside, we kissed 20 a few times, couldn't really break through it. It really took the big sell-off yesterday to get us that next leg upward there in vol. And so far, as you would expect, the futures are firmer, but still kind of lagging that move a little bit out there. Let's go out to Mr. Rhoads first. So what's catching your eye out there in the VIX futures curve this week, sir?
To bigger discount relative to spot. I'm kind of surprised at that, but I guess everybody, you got to go in one direction or another, and that's what we're looking at as far as the election goes. You got to think, is volatility going to come in or is it going to hold up? I would lean toward holding up a bit. So I'm kind of surprised that's widened out in the past week or so. I kind of expected status quo across the board. And then the December, I'm looking beyond the election and looking at the relationship between December and January. This VSTOXX VIX differential still holds up, and I talked about it last week, and I know we'll get to the VSTOXX term structure as well, but the VIX term structure, you've got December at a 20-cent discount to January, and then when you look over in VSTOXX, you got December at a 95-cent discount. So maybe a spread calendar trade. If it looks like we start seeing excess volatility from the election, I wouldn't be surprised if November and December VSTOXX go up more than November, December VIX, since they're not really. January, December, I think would move up a bit if it looks like this is going to be a protracted type thing. So maybe you buy December VSTOXX, short January VSTOXX, and short December VIX, and buy January VIX. I think I said that right.
Candy. Striking again, sir. But yes, that's interesting. We'll get to a little more VSTOXX fun in a second as we go beyond our shores. But first, Mr. Meatball, sir, what's catching your eye out there in the vol surface this week?
Well, Well, as I alluded, I put this out on Twitter, but if you go back and look at what the curve looked like with, I was looking at yesterday. If you look at, so we currently have essentially 4 days until they announce the results of the election, you would think. And I went and looked at the VIX curve from, the VIX curve today. You've got the VIX at 2178, that front month future at 1905, at 20, December 1905, and January at 1930. If you went back and looked at November of 2016, same number of days, so you'd be talking like November 3rd. The VIX future had a little bit less time to expire. Expired on November 16th that year. But the VIX was at 22 and a half, if you will, 2240. Front month future 1940, December 1897, January 1927. So you had almost the exact same. Here, I'll cut this picture so you guys can see it. You have almost the exact same shape curve that we had 8 years ago. I'll drop this in our Skype chat, and Mark, you can feel free to share that with your insiders. But that's what the curve looked like exactly 8 years ago in the exact same scenario. And here's what it looks like now. And it's crazy how similar they look. Like, it's kind of nutty how similar they look. And, I think that's just kind of goes to show you how history does echo.
Yeah, I'm looking here at these, and listeners, we'll see if we can get these out for you. Maybe we'll tweet them out live so everybody can see them out here. But you're right, they do look eerily similar. So producer, let's tweet both of those. Got to have them together. Hard to digest on their own, but interesting stuff. Speaking of interesting stuff, listeners, time to cast our gaze beyond these shores and see what's lighting up the international vol market. Yes, it is time once again for the International Volatility Review.
It's time to explore what's happening in the volatility market beyond our shores. It's time for the International Volatility Review. The International Volatility segment is brought to you by Eurex, home of EuroSTOXX, VSTOXX, DAX, and the German government bond-based Eurobund, Eurobobble, Euroshots derivatives. Eurex is the leading European derivatives exchange. Learn more about trading VSTOXX futures and options, the European Volatility Benchmark, at www.eurex.com/VSTOXX.
All right, listeners, let's get into a little bit of the old International Volatility Review. And looking here right now, VSTOXX, as Russell was alluding to earlier, closing a wee bit higher, a wee bit frothier than it was on our last show. Almost exactly 2 points, 1.95 points higher than it was a week ago at a 20.86. Just for a frame of reference, that high obviously came back on August 5th for this year, 31.16. So not quite there yet, but also not quite sniffing the 52-week low, which came back in December of last year as well, a 12.12. So hanging out pretty close to the middle of that 52-week range right now. Where will we head in the coming week? Where will we head after the election? That's the interesting stuff we're going to talk about here right now. And Matt, when you're not talking to us here on this show, you're out there talking to all the folks about all things VSTOXX. So first off, what's catching your eye in terms of VSTOXX movement? And then B, what are you seeing out there in terms of volume? And what are you hearing from the folks? What are they inquiring about when they're contacting you to chat about all things VSTOXX?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as I said, it's been a relatively quiet October. The first half of the year was definitely a banner year for VSTOXX. VSTOXX futures have been up something like 17% year over year, ADV-wise. The option side up almost 45%. So a pretty great year. With that being said, what we've seen and kind of the positioning we've seen recently, and this was something that we highlighted on our focus day with Russell last week, was the general consensus, I think, from what we see at least, and some of the banks are calling this, is you'll probably see a contraction in vol. Again, at least from a VSTOXX standpoint, in the weeks after the election. JP Morgan, for example, they were pitching a December 17-15 strike 1x2 put spread that had a pretty good following. And I think if you look at that December 15 strike put, the open interest is still pretty chunky. But what I think is interesting is now the same bank, JP Morgan, is saying, well, you should watch though, because depending on who wins this election, you may see VSTOXX start to move to a premium relative to VIX. So, JP Morgan's strategy team actually put out a call last week, buy Jan 25 VIX puts, and you can partially fund that by selling VSTOXX Jan 25 puts, which I think is an interesting trade. Again, I think the general kind of consensus from what we see is you'll probably see a reversion in vol to a certain extent, again, at least in those couple weeks after the election. But, January, February, I think that's anybody's guess. We have German elections in 2025. So, yeah, I mean, really from a short-term standpoint, very likely I don't think we see VSTOXX sit at 20, but it's hard to tell where we go in Q1.
Interesting. A VIX VSTOXX pairs trade out in Jan. I kind of like that. It's intriguing. You mentioned that 1x2 put spread. We have talked about that on the show before. That was interesting for a couple of reasons. A, because it was sizable. B, we don't see a lot of 1x2 put spreads in the vol space. It's usually 1x2 the other way to the upside. So the 1x2 put spread is intriguing. I don't care what product it's in, just because we don't see it very much. So the fact that they were putting one of those on and recommending one of those for size in VSTOXX, also kind of fascinating. Mr. Rhoads, I know you've been watching this space. You've been watching that 1x2 put spread a lot as well. What's catching your eye out there in the VSTOXX landscape this week, sir?
They're still kind of easing out of that that put spread. I got to update my spreadsheet a little bit, but I know that they continue to piece by piece try to get out of that, and did fairly well with it, if I remember correctly, at least on the initial pieces that folks got out of. Once we get past December expiration, I'm definitely gonna do a little summary of everything that we saw, and I love tracking trades like that. Again, the just looking at the VSTOXX term structure, they're both kind of flattish, which always indicates a bit of uncertainty. I really that December at such a discount to January is really it's sticking in my brain, because I do feel like we're not going to get through the end of 2024 without at least a little bit more global volatility. And if it happens right after, even if it happens very close to November expiration, it'll have more of an impact on December than January. So I think there's a long vol into the end of the year trade, even if you don't want to pair it up with something in VIX to do in that space.
That certainly would be intriguing as well. And I know, Russell, you guys just had your big online webinar event, full day of all things VSTOXX. I know you were working on getting an archive. Is that available yet, sir?
Archive yet? That'd be Matt, not me.
Oh, Matt. Then Matt,
they haven't sent me anything that says that. So
Matt, you're the man to ask. Can the folks check out that archive yet, sir?
They sure can. So the replay is on YouTube if you don't want to dig for it. EuropeanVolatility.substack.com. We put it on there today, but Russell will send it to you right after this call as well.
All right.
Probably do it while the call's going on, because Matt, I'm always. It's funny. Sometimes I'll back test something during the program. I'm always multitasking as I'm here. It makes the time fly by. But I think the biggest takeaway was, and this is a bit concerning to me because I heard it again this week at a conference. When everybody has the same mindset around something, you've got to worry a bit, and there just really is this common thought out there that once the election is over, and over the near term, not once the election is over using Pettifree's January 7th, But once the election is over next week, that we're going to see volatility come back down. And that's just something that is polarizing and is upset as about half the country is going to be based on the outcome. I don't see this thing going away quietly.
Let's hope we don't have a repeat of Jan 6th there. But that
I don't think it'll be that extreme, but because they're more prepared for it. If you're prepared, if they had been better prepared for that, it never would have happened.
That's true. That is true. But that expiration, that settlement date for those binaries does give me some pause. So, I see you're floating in our chat, sir. If you do have the link, if you want to post it in our chat, I'm sure a lot of our hardcores in the chat would like to check out that archive link as well. So you can check that out for yourselves, listeners. And as always, you know where to go to check out all this data we're talking about on VSTOXX and do your own digging over there. Eurex.com, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fire. /VSTOXX will get you right to all this fun we're talking about as we keep on rolling here with the show. Right on into the land of VIX options. It was looking really sleepy when we kicked off the show. VIX was right around 250,000 contracts. It has since launched up to nearly 700,000. So just as we've been talking here, listeners, looks like some action hitting the tape out there in VIX land. So maybe you have something to sink our teeth into today. In terms of ADV, yesterday notwithstanding, it's been mostly quiet. Like I was saying at the top of the show, it does seem like the near-dated contracts are really eating into a lot of the speculative and the hedging flow we would have normally seen at this time in election cycle. No one's putting anything on. They're keeping their powder dry. And if they're worried about something, they're putting it on, like Russell said, 259 on Tuesday. So, yeah, it's a very different environment than even 4 years ago, listeners. So that ADV reflecting that, 746 on the tape right now, down another 24,000 from this time last week. So heading into an election, you would not expect that. You would think, the S&P would be doing more. You would think the vol products would be doing more. And yet, as Matt alluded to, it's a surprisingly quiet time, and I do think the zero-day phenomenon has something to do with that. In terms of the top 10 out here in VIX land, cost you 205,000 contracts to break into the top 10 right now. So that is fairly heavy for VIX. So maybe that reflects a little bit more interest going on out there if the actual day-to-day volume does not. And by the way, looking at the top 10 right now, we are hanging out 6-4. Calls over puts. So right near that 50-50 line, which is kind of fascinating and pretty put heavy if you know anything about VIX. So intriguing stuff out there. I'll break down a top 10, then we'll get out to some weekly action here in VIX land. Number 10, 205,000 is what it cost you to break in this week. That gets you to our old pal, the Jan 42 halves. Number 9, 231,000 of the Nov 19 calls. Number 8, here we go, listeners. 239,000. One of my favorite positions on the board, the Nov doubles, even though I know it's part of a vertical, but still, it's fun to see that there. Number 7, 253,000 of the Nov 14 puts. Those are looking more dire by the day, listeners. Number 6, 254,000 of the Nov 40s, 4-0. So if the Nov doubles not doing it for you, allow me to present number 6, the Nov 40s, 254,000. Number 5, 308,000 of the Nov 20s. Looking a lot better now than they were a week ago. Number 4, 310,000. We got a little put strip going here. Number 10, 310,000 of the Nov 16 puts. If that's not long-term enough for you, allow me to present number 3, 326,000 of the DEES 13 puts. I like the distance. I like going out to December. 13, I mean, if there's a month on the board that could threaten the 13, DEES is certainly it. Who knows? Well, let's hope we're hanging out at a 13 in December. That means things have settled down. That means we're not having a contested, ridiculous post-election period, which is not good for anyone. So let's hope those come to pass. Right now, my gut is telling me maybe not, but we shall see. And then number 2, 341,000 of the Nov 15 puts. Again, the clock ticking for those bad boys as well. And the number 1 big boy position out there in VIX land this week, 347,000 of the Nov 35 calls. All right, listeners. Enough of that fun, enough of the pleasantries. Let's get down to our fun business. It is time for Russell's Weekly Rundown.
Now, Russell's Weekly Rundown. Now, Russell's Weekly Rundown.
All right. So nice. We have to play it twice, listeners. Mr. Rhoads, what's catching your eye on the VIX weekly front in our final week before the election, sir?
Way out of order. Just they're all these trades relate to each other and stuff. So I'm going to start with a trade that happened about 30 minutes into the trading day this morning. Somebody bought the November 13th 25 call for 90 cents, sold the November 13th 30 call for 53 cents, net cost of 37 cents. What do we think that is? We think that's somebody looking for some volatility going into the election. That is not what that trade is. That trade was an exit. Somebody sold, same size, day before, somebody put that trade on for a 56-cent credit. So they made about 20 cents short in volatility using the November 13th options in front of the employment number. And a part of me thinks maybe they put that trade on, and if we reacted badly to the employment number, they'd be a little patient and hope that it came back down right before the election. That's kind of the mindset that I think I would have had behind that one. A Thursday trade that's looking for higher volatility, and VIX was already at 22.74. Somebody bought 600 of the November 6th 23 calls and sold the same number of the 39 strike calls at 8, and they did this at a net cost of $1.10. I hope they weren't doing this for election volatility. If they were, they don't listen to us, because we've talked about how the proper expiration is the 13th, not the 6th, at least in my mind. If you want to do something for the 6th, put the trade on late on the 5th, and and that way, if we do get a big overnight move into settlement, in fact, if you're going to do something like that, maybe just buy a slightly out of the money call if it's not terribly expensive, because I think if settlement is going to be goofy in one direction or another, it would probably be higher on that one. So on Wednesday, here's the trade I'm not real wild about. Somebody sold 100 of the November 6th 28 calls for 21 cents. It doesn't look like it was paired with anything else. I know they're going to make money off this trade, most likely. I wouldn't have done that in front of the employment number. Even though the lack of reaction to the employment number is not shocking, I still wouldn't want that 5 to 10% chance that I'm on the wrong side of something. And it sure isn't worth 21 cents. And then I think I'm going to have best, worst, and most interesting, because this is the most interesting trade. On Tuesday, I saw somebody bought the October 15th calls, 15 calls. They bought a little over 100 of them or so, and they paid $4.55 for them, and they sold the same number of the November 6th 15 calls for $4.38. And it's a rolling transaction. So I started going backwards. And in mid-October, they shorted those 15 calls for $4.61. So they made a whopping 6 cents off of that.
I was going to say, it's a buyer.
But there's more. There's more. That trade was initiated on October 18th. And when they did that, they bought to cover some October 23rd 16 calls at 358. They had sold those short at 514. So it looks like somebody's doing kind of a consistent short in the money call just to have a consistent short position in VIX, and they're using the weeklies to do that. After that, I kind of get lost trying to track it because I couldn't find an October 16th expiring trade. But I picked up on somebody that's selling in the money calls with a little juice to basically be consistently short VIX, with VIX up in the upper teens 20 range right now.
Interesting. I'll have to turn your nickname to Detective Dr. VIX and VSTOXX out there, tracking down all this flow. It is fun when you start digging into the history of a trade, is it not? And then you're like, where does this thing end? It keeps going. Some of the ones you look at, you're like, oh my God, I'm going back 12 months now. They're still rolling. Can we stop it? But yes, it is interesting stuff. In the money, makes sense. There's a premium out there to be had. You might pop a few tums during the lifespan of those trades, and our friend there rolled and kind of scratched on one, but he made money on the other. Intriguing. Not a use case we see all the time out there in VIX land. People have written in before saying, why don't more people do that type of trade in VIX? So there you go, listeners. Russell discovered one for you. Let's see what we can discover out here in the big mothership options. Like we said, it's popping off a little bit today after starting off kind of sleepy. 675,000 contracts on the tape. I think I discovered what what's going on out here. Looks like it was a Nov 15, 14, 13 put spread going up, but not one by one. 150,000 of the 15 puts. Looks like paper maybe sold those for 19 cents against 150,000 of the 14 puts for 7 cents, and then 100,000 of the 13 puts for 2 cents. So riddle me that one. Doesn't seem like they're rolling. There is size OI though on all these strikes, so it's hard to intuit exactly. The only one that's clearly opening are the 13 puts. So maybe they're bailing on those, rolling up to the 14 puts, but then the 15 puts is kind of a weird one as well. So all sorts of weird paper, but that's why we're seeing this little bit of resurgence of action today. You're talking 300,000 contracts right there, which is why we're seeing 675 on the tape out there. So our top three, obviously $1.50 of the Nov 14 puts today, 100,000 exactly pretty much of the Nov 13 puts, 68,000 of the 15 puts. Number 4, 36,000 of the Nov 16 puts. Fifth place out there on today's paper, 19,000 of the D's 15 puts. Thursday, yesterday, the banger day of the week. Without this, we really would have had not much volume at all this week. 1.58 million contracts. All it took is a nearly 2% sell-off in the S&P to kind of wake VIX out of its slumber in the week before an election. How crazy is that? But that's what it took. 1.58 million contracts. The big dog yesterday, Nov 16 puts, 126,000. Our guest yesterday on the option block pointing that fact out as well. On a day when VIX was popping hard, puts were outnumbering calls in VIX options. You don't see that too often. Maybe a bit of some folks coming in to take the opportunity to fade this. Either way, $1.26 of the Nov 16 puts, followed by number 2, 112,000 of the Nov 15 puts. Number 3, 110,000 of the Nov 20 puts. Number 4, man, a put palooza, 89,000 of the Nov 18 puts. Maybe there is something to that. And then number 5, 67,000 of what you might expect on a day when VIX is popping and the market is dropping. 68,000 of the Nov 35 calls. Wednesday, 602,000 on the tape. The big dog, 77,000 of the Nov 15 puts. Number 2, 60K of the Nov 17 puts. Number 3, 49,000 of the Nov 40 calls, 4 O's. Number 4, 28,000 of the D's 13 puts. My old pal there. And rounding out the top 5 on a pretty light Wednesday, 25,000 of the Nov 27s. Tuesday, same deal, but less paper, 547 on the tape. The big dog, 42,000 of the Nov 19s. Got some calls finally. Number 2, 37,000 of the Nov 18 puts. Number 3, 36,000 of the Nov 16 puts. Number 4, 30K of the Nov 19 puts. And bringing up the rear on a light Tuesday, 29,000 of the Nov 25s. Speaking of light Monday, absolutely nothing. The day after all this news on the weekend of this, these strikes and everything else going on in the Middle East, and nobody seems to care. 342,000 contracts on the tape. VIX goes to die. UVIX goes to die. I'll talk about that in a minute. 44,000 was the big dog on the tape on Monday of the D's 14 half puts, followed by 22,000 for number 2 of the D's 13 half puts. So maybe some roll action there, 1 by 2. And not the rest of it too light to not even really merit discussing. Mr. Meatball, are you surprised like I am at just really how anemic volume is right now heading into the election? And then anything catching your eye on the VIX options front this week, sir?
I'm not surprised. We probably saw most of the positioning get done weeks ago. I mean, you talked about those December 13 puts that are open. What do you think they're buying those for? We do see a pretty big. I mean, did you see this November spread go up today, Mark?
That's what I was trying to suss out. Do you have more detail on that?
I'm looking at it right now.
It looks like an exit.
It has the whiff of that.
It looks like I found where they bought the 14 puts and I'm sorry, Mark, Sebastian, talking over you like this, but I found where they bought 100,000 of the 14 puts back on October 16th at prices between 11 and 12 cents. And a similar 100,000 or so of the 16 puts, somebody paid 60 cents for them back on October 18th. October 16th. Sorry.
It was a 1 by 3 by 2 trade.
Okay.
So they were long 50,000 of the 15 puts, short 150,000 of the 14 puts. They were long 100,000 of the 13 puts. They were looking for VIX to pull back, obviously, before the election, not because it does appear to be an exit. But that is the big ticket. They're closing up that 1x3x2. Outside of that, biggest trade of the day that is opening is the December 14.5 puts. You have a sweep buyer of the 18s, 17s, and 16s in November. They bought 10,000 each. Or maybe they sold them. I'm not sure what they did here, but these all traded mid-market, so it's hard exactly to tell what they're doing. But 30,000 lot sweep on the 18s, 16s, and 17s. Looking at Halloween, the scary trade for Halloween was a buyer of the November 35 calls and a buyer of the December 33.55 call spread. They did 50,000 of the Nov 35s versus the 33.55. So my guess is they sold the Nov 35 calls to close, bought to open the 33.55 call spread in December. That was the biggest trade from Thursday. Just a little bit of a hedge roll. Maybe they feel like they're running out of time. Nothing huge on Wednesday. Biggest trade, your favorite trade, the December 13 puts, 25,000 of those, and a seller of the November 40 calls. Tuesday, biggest trade on Tuesday was the November 25 calls. They bought 50,000 of those for 80. Nope, they canceled it. They only bought 25,000. They paid 86 cents. So nothing huge on that day. And then Monday, which was another fun one that we've got that a December, the biggest trade was a December, like kind of weird risk reversal thing. This all went up at the same time. Looks like they sold the December 16 puts at 112, sold the December 22 calls, sold the December 13 puts, sold the 14.5 puts and the 13.5 puts. So a lot of vol selling there. And that was the biggest trade that day. So yeah, nothing really crazy this week, but definitely nobody, what's interesting is none of these really, outside of those, maybe the December 13s, really appear to be election positioning.
I know you like yourself a good VIX put. Where are you on these D's 13s? They're a cheap flyer, 12 cents, I guess, if you want to.
I'd buy them before I'd sell them.
Yeah, hell yeah. It just feels like a bit of a bridge too far for me. I hope they're right. I hope those crush it. That'd be nice, for the world.
Well, I wait till you hear my crystal ball. I think you'll be surprised.
Oh, okay. A little bit of a tease there as we head on into some of the other vol ETPs. Matt, I know when you're not fielding calls left, right, and center for all things VSTOXX, you have your finger on the pulse of the vol market. So I'm sure you're watching some of the vol ETP action out there. Which of these vol products are on your radar these days? Do you watch, inverse vol like an SVIX? Are you a VXX guy, UVXY? Any of these products floating your boat, coming on your radar these days, Matt?
I look at UVXY every once in a while, but I mean, generally the levered plays are not something I look at too much. Would be nice if we had a VSTOXX ETF or an ETN, but doesn't look like we're going to have one anytime soon, sadly.
I was going to say, that's what we're missing in the ecosystem there. A little bit of a levered or an inverse VSTOXX, I think the folks can get behind that, Matt. I don't know. I'm just putting that out there. Just two guys talking on a show. It might be kind of a fun thing. Just throwing it out. I'm sure you guys have never considered that over there. You never heard that before.
We had one back in the day. There was one back in 2020. It got delisted at the height of the pandemic, sadly.
Oh, missed it by that much, sir.
Exactly.
Jeez. Man, just held on to that one a little longer. That would have been... Got to imagine a few people would have been intrigued by that. Speaking of intriguing, listener, let's get out and see what's intriguing in the vol ETP universe this week. Let's go inverse first, as we are wont to do. SVIX. The Meatball and Russell's beloved SVIX, 23 even right now, giving back some, so vol's firming up a little bit as the show is progressing here. It was a little bit north of 23, now it's back to about a 23 even. That puts it off about 1.2 points from where it was this time last week. Doing some paper today, 7,800 contracts on the tape. That's a good thing, because the ADV is only 58,500, so I've been saying for a while, SVIX volume is going in the wrong direction, so this hopefully will jazz things up. And you know what? To keep things even, Steven, we had him on the show a few weeks ago. Let's throw a little love the SVOL way as well. SVOL at a 21 even, so not that dissimilar from a price level out there as well. That's down half a point, putting up a whopping 91 contracts today. So liquidity profile a little bit different. I know for some of you may be looking for something a little bit different in the inverse vol space. Maybe SVOL underlying is the way to go. Mr. Meatball, we'll start with you this time. You're out there running this newsletter on all things inverse vol, sir. What's catching your eye in SVIX these days?
Yeah, well, and I think until the election comes around, SVIX is going to be stuck in no man's land, because that, when the curve is in this kind of backwardation, or between November and, when the VIX is traded by the whole curve, that's going to create a negative drag on SVIX and a positive drag on the other ETPs. And it's been that way for several weeks. I think post-election, it'll be a very different curve.
So no action in the Meatball newsletter for this week on SVIX?
Not really.
Sit on the hill and watch the Tigers fight, or maybe just watch the Tigers sleep. Kind of weak out there. Mr. Rhoads, what's catching your eye in the inverse vol space these days, sir?
SVIX is still stuck. And, I have to apologize to everybody because the UVIX thing sure did last weekend. I should have known it the second that all three of us agreed on it. And we're like, yeah. See, notice that I'm throwing you two under the bus with me on that.
Yeah, I noticed how you dragged us in there as well. I appreciate that, sir.
Yeah, but it's all on me. If you hit the button, it's your own fault. So that one was completely on me. I just did double a normal position while we were talking last week. It really did feel like people were starting to worry about something over the weekend. Did Israel hit Iran last weekend or the weekend before?
It was last weekend.
I think it was last weekend.
It was during the
part of me wonders if that's what, if people were hearing about something like that getting ready to happen. And the fact that it went so well for Israel and did not go particularly well for Iran. And it looks like Israel did so much damage that Iran doesn't really have the ability to even fight back right now. That maybe that's why the markets did not have a little volatility bump for me on Monday morning like I was hoping it would.
Yeah, when they struck early, I was like, okay, it's looking kind of good for Dr. VIX's trade, and I was kind of lamenting not.
When I saw that, I was like, all right, not that I'm like that, but you know what I mean.
And then after I saw, people have been whistling past the graveyard in the Middle East vol for a while. Did we talk about this on our This Week in Futures option show out there? Just how they've been crushing vol and every crude oil and every energy product for a while, just on the belief that this is all over, which seems kind of crazy to me. There's talk, even on the show yesterday, there were rumors Iran's planning a big retaliatory strike right before the election here in the U.S., which is crazy to me, unless they really want one candidate to win who doesn't really like them very much. That seems like a strange strategy, but either way, and folks are still crushing vol out there. Strokes are still crushing the underlying. So you're right. It's a strange thing, but that is where we are. Speaking of your beloved UVIX, 580 right now. So if we had opened here on Monday, Russell, you're looking like a hero, looking like a champ.
I know.
But alas, no. Up 0.3 of a point. It got all that pretty much while we were talking on the show today, listeners. It was 5.5 when we kicked off the show. That's pretty much where it went out on Friday last week, maybe 560, and then it kind of gave up the ghost over the weekend, which you don't see too often out there, but that happens. 40,000 contracts on the tape for UVIX right now as well, which is looking pretty good. The ADV is only 34,000. That's up 3,000 on the week. Let's do a quick run through of the rest as well, then we'll get to our crystal ball for this week. UVXY, all you UVXY Defense Force fans out there, 29.5 right now, up 2.5 points from last week. 68,000 contracts on the tape. So, we're starting to see a little bit of a volume resurgence here towards the end of the week. Hopefully this will hold. The ADV is 54,000. That's moving in the wrong direction as well. That's down 1,000 out there in UVXY. And then our old pal VXX, 56.25, catching a bit as well, lifting a point over the course of our show. It's up 3.5 points now. Putting up some numbers today as well, 35,000. The ADV is only 25,000. So in the last hour, it seems like we've seen vol firm up a little bit, and all of the vol products catch a little bit of a lift on the volume front. So maybe, I'm not going to say it again because we talked about it last week, but maybe there's a whiff of unease heading into the weekend. But we're never uneasy when we head on into the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, listeners, welcome to the crystal ball, the most difficult, the most dangerous portion of the show. And let's see, as we're coming into the end of the show, things are firming up a little bit. Let's see, at the start of the show, we were at 21 3/4 in VIX cash. We're up about exactly half a point, a little more than that now, 22.29 in VIX cash. We already told you at the top of the show where VSTOXX closed this morning, 20.86. So let's go around the horn. You know, the meatball and I were kind of splitting the uprights on VSTOXX. He was at 21.12. I was at 20.33. So he was about a tenth of a point closer. None of us winning, though, on VSTOXX. Russell at a 19 3/4. So all of us still dialing in our VSTOXX models. Maybe Matt can point us in the right direction this week. And then on the VIX side, by the way, on the show last week, it was myself. It was Dr. VSTOXX. It was Mr. Meatball. And we had Alec joining us last week as well. On the VIX side, we had 22.29. Oh, Mr. Meatball, your palindromic nonsense, 22.22. Coming in right under the wire. That puts us at a crystal ball win for the Meatball. Even a broken clock is right twice a year. Getting a nice crystal ball victory for the Meatball out there. Russell's at a 20.5. No joy for him. I was at a 19 3/4. No joy for me. Alec feeling the downside at an 18.70. No joy for him either. So, Mr. Meatball, you are our winner this week. You get to choose. Do you want to go first? Do you want to pick somebody else to go first?
No, I'll go first.
All right, have at it, sir.
I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen. I think we could be soft. I wouldn't be surprised if today ends up either flattish or red. I think you're going to see the VIX up through Wednesday, and then we're going to see some real vol collapse. And I'm not a believer that this is going to turn into some disaster. I just don't see it. And I think that I want to, in palindromic nonsense terms, I'm going to go with a VIX of 1441.
Whoa.
And a VSTOXX of 1551.
Whoa. So you already bought those D's 13 puts. That was you, all 362,000. Wow. All right. Hey, you know what? I hope that comes to pass. I hope that comes to pass for your puts, for society as a whole, whoever you want to win. At least that number means we have a definite winner, at least. There's no pitchforks in the street or any of that kind of nonsense. So, wow, 1441. Man, all right. Interesting. Mr. Matz, you weren't on last week, so you get the fun of going next. If you want to do both, you can. If you want to just dive right into VSTOXX, we're all listening really hard to your VSTOXX prediction because we're all still trying to tune in our prediction model. So you got any tips for us, sir?
I will happily do both. I won't go as far as Mark with a 14 handle, but I do agree that maybe we were being a little dramatic with this election. I think things generally get wrapped up by next Friday. Maybe there's still a little election risk premium heading into the weekend. But I will say 18 flat for VIX next Friday, 1775 for VSTOXX.
Wow, moving almost into parity there. That's kind of interesting as well. That spread perhaps collapsing out there. Interesting stuff out there. And then let's see who was closer. Russell was closer on VIX, so I will go next. Let's see. What am I feeling for this time? I don't know if I feel the vol collapse that the Meatball is putting out there. I could see a little bit less, though. Let's see. I don't hate where I am this week. I might just dial it down a little bit. I might say 1925 for VIX. And let's keep VSTOXX in the same ballpark, but I'm going to say 2001 for VSTOXX. So there you go. Mr. Rhoads, you get to go last, sir. What are you feeling for this time next week?
You get to go last. I love it. I'm taking the opposite end of the spectrum from Mr. Sebastian.
No. 58 VIX.
Following his methodology, I think VSTOXX will be at a discount to VIX. And I don't think the thing will be resolved next week. We may think it, but, well, of course, it's not going to be resolved until Pettifree says who's president on January 7th.
Exactly. Got to wait for
Donald. And you know what? I would love it if that guy picked our president. I'm sure he would be a great and very harsh leader, a benevolent leader. VSTOXX, I'm going with 2332. And VIX, I'm going with 2442.
Oh, man.
It grows.
So I was thinking upper 20s, but none of you guys, pushed the 20 boundary, so I brought myself down a bit.
Wow. I don't like your prediction, just for what it entails.
I know, nobody likes my prediction. Does that mean we buy UVIX on the close Tuesday for Wednesday?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think it does.
If you're looking at your prediction, I think that's exactly what that means, sir. Wow. All right, listeners, I haven't looked yet. Let's see where our chat's going high too. 2640, 22 half. 22 half's not crazy. Queen, she's usually pretty good. 18 half, so she's calling for calmer heads. Let's hope Queen is correct. Just society-wise, listeners, I don't think any of us want Russell to be. That means we have a lot of hanging chads and all sorts of nonsense going on this time a week from now. Let's hope not. Well, unfortunately, that music means we are done for right now. But before we go, let's go around the horn. Mr. Matt, if folks want to dig into all things VSTOXX in a lot more detail, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
You can always go to the Eurex website, eurex.com/VSTOXX, or our Substack, where we post more often, europeanvolatility.substack.com.
There you go. Check out their Substack if you are intrigued, listening. A lot more stuff going up on Substack, I noticed. Seems like it's having a resurgence these days. So check them out there, listeners, if you want. I know you guys are hitting us up all the time with questions about, VSTOXX data and historical. It's all there. Go to those sites, and you could find it for yourselves, or hit up a guy like Matt. He'll be happy to give you the specifics over there. And Mr. Meatball, if folks want more, either your SVIX newsletter, which you said is going to be sleepy, or maybe they want to question you about your palindromic vol picks, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, come to optionpit.com and follow me on Twitter at optionpit. I dropped a fun nugget this morning out on Twitter, so make sure you're following me.
Give them a follow at optionpit. And Mr. Rhoads, what can they find if they follow you, sir?
Just everything I do, I put out on Twitter. I did put a link. I did tweet out a link to the Eurex Substack, which I think Matt's been sending these things out via email, and they've been very useful for me. So I really do encourage anybody that's even got a passing interest in VSTOXX to take a look at what they're putting up there, and then the Focus Day, those videos are up there as well. In fact, it's always weird when you open a new website and your face is right there looking at you. But that's what's at the top of it right now.
There you go, listeners. Get a face full of Russell when you head on over.
Oh, my God.
You should be checking out. We put the link in our chat. We will tweet it out after the show for the full webinar day as well. A whole day of VSTOXX, a whole day of Mr. Dr. VSTOXX holding court out there and all those sessions. Good stuff. I'm looking forward to checking it out myself, so you should be checking it out, listeners. And speaking of checking things out, if you want more analysis like this heading into the big day next week, guess what? We're coming back with a whole bunch of special guests to talk you off the ledge, give you some non-biased, non-political, just straight down the middle, fun analysis of what's going on over there all throughout election night. We'll be talking markets. We'll be talking all sorts of fun. If your candidate is losing, we'll talk you off the ledge. If you're winning, you can come have fun. Whatever the case may be. Should be a good time. If past is prologue, these have been interesting. Also, a lot of surprises pop off during these. So make sure you check it out. We will be going live at, I believe, 6 p.m. Central, so an hour before when the polls close here in Chi-Town. And then we'll be going for till my voice dies, pretty much, listeners. Hopefully by the end of that, we will know what the hell's going on. But if Russell's prediction is to be believed, perhaps not. But intriguing stuff. Join us for that if you want to have a good time. Then, of course, we'll be back next Friday. Who knows what's in store for us, listeners, on the next episode of Volatility Views. Stay safe out there, everybody.
Are you paying too much to trade options? If you're not trading on public.com, the answer is yes. Public is the only platform where you can earn a rebate on every option contract traded, and that's in addition to no commissions or per contract fees. There's no one else out there paying trading rebates, so you won't find a better deal. Bottom line, if you're paying more than $0 to place an options trade, then you're paying too much. Switch to Public and start getting rebates on every single contract traded, only at public.com. The International Volatility segment is brought to you by Eurex, home of EuroSTOXX, VSTOXX, DAX, and the German government bond-based Eurobund, Eurobobble, Euroshots derivatives. Eurex is the leading European derivatives exchange. Learn more about trading VSTOXX futures and options, the European Volatility Benchmark, at www.eurex.com/VSTOXX. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.